Another really good reminder during the training for me was to trust the child a little more, especially when you're working with little ones. And typically I'm working with kids on the spectrum, and we're trying so hard to keep their attention with us. And if they turn around and they walk away or they break an engagement, we're quick to try to grab them back. And one of the things I learned was like to trust the child, and that if the relationship is really there, you're going to be interesting enough, they're going to come back to you, but they're breaking for a reason. So a lot of times that disconnect is I'm overstimulated, I need a sensory break, or, my brain needs to catch up with how much language is going on. So I think that's, giving some space when a child kind of breaks that interaction, and giving them some credit for that they're going to try to come back into that interaction.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Jessica, and this is All Things Sensory by Harkla.
We are both certified occupational therapy assistants, and together with Harkla, we are on a mission to empower parents, therapists, and educators to help raise confident and strong children of all abilities.
On this podcast, we chat about all things sensory, diving into special needs, occupational therapy, parenting, self-care, overall health and wellness, and so much more.
We are here to provide raw, honest, and fun strategies, ideas, and information for parents, therapists, and educators, as well as other professionals to implement into daily life.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey there, welcome back to All Things Sensory by Harkla. We're so happy to have you here today. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Jessica, and today we are interviewing Lori, who we have had on the podcast before, but she's back again.
Yep, today we are talking all about DIR, floor time, early intervention, facilitating communication for our early intervention clients, and she is just a wealth of knowledge and just passion. Mm-hmm. You can just feel the passion in her.
Yeah, she's very knowledgeable. I always think of the word warm when I think of her. You know, she's just very warm and kind and just wants to help people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's jump in.
Okay. Hello, Lori. Welcome back to All Things Sensory.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be back.
Yes, we interviewed you, 3 years ago?
November of 2021.
3.5 years ago.
Wow. On, I believe, dyslexia, am I correct?
Yes, it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so if you remember, we start off with our secret questions.
Yes.
And we are going to ask you the same secret questions as before and compare your answers.
Oh, okay.
Just for fun.
This is very fun.
Yes. Okay, first question. Would you rather give up AC in your house or heat in your house for the rest of your life?
A sink?
AC, air conditioning.
Heat. Heat. I would give up heat.
You need it to be cold. You also live in Georgia.
I live in Alabama.
Alabama, that's right.
Yeah.
You live in Alabama. So it's...
I can layer, but you can't, you can only strip so much, so yeah.
What did she say last time?
Same answer as last time.
Yeah.
Great. Next question. What is your favorite type of dessert?
Creme brulee.
What did she say last time?
I can't remember. Something about drizzling.
Yeah, it's the crunchy. You know, when they take the torch and they crisp the sugar and
I also am a big creme brulee fan. Love that one.
Yeah.
All right. What famous person would you like to have dinner with?
Oh. It should really be much deeper than this, but it's going to be Bruce Springsteen.
You confessed your deep love for him in our last episode.
Yeah.
That's still the same.
You know, I feel like I should go for, somebody really who's changed the world, like Mother Teresa or something like that. But no, it's Bruce.
I think that's
Bruce.
Great.
It's Bruce.
Next question. This is very deep. Would you rather have 14 giraffes or 14 elephants?
I remembered that there was a question about giraffes, and I could not remember the context. I'm sticking with the giraffes.
That is correct, yes. That's correct. There's no right or wrong answer, but yes, you did.
But I think that's consistent, yeah.
Yes.
you are very consistent.
All right, our last question and our most favorite one of all. What is your sensory quirk?
Weighted blankets. I gotta have a weighted blanket. I have a weighted lap pad on my knee right now. Always, yeah. When I'm sitting at the computer doing work, I've got a weighted shoulder. Yeah.
You
Like
are a pro
anything,
speaker.
anything that pushes me into the ground.
Yep, perfect.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. Well, now that everyone truly knows all your deepest, darkest secrets, your love for Bruce, your giraffes, everything, we are going to jump into our topic today, which really is going to be specializing in early intervention and specifically the DIR floor time approach, which I know you recently have taken some classes and have really immersed yourself in this topic.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I'm very passionate about this. So excited to talk to you about it.
Yeah, so let's start there. Can you explain what DIR floor time is?
Yes. So DIR floor time is it's a relationship based intervention program for really we tend to think of it primarily in the early intervention area for young children. I think most people who think about it are going to think about toddlers and preschoolers on the autism spectrum, but it really does encompass much, much more than that. And it's very much developmentally based and socially emotionally grounded. So it's really based on the assumption that all learning occurs through safe connection, right? And through meaningful connection. So,
Which I think is such an important factor for any professional working with kids to consider. You know, it almost seems like it should be common sense, right? But when you go in, you take a child to a professional and they're cold or they're not engaged or they're tired or they're having an off day, like the child can sense that disconnection and they don't want to participate and they don't want to learn and grow and play in that sort of environment.
Absolutely. And I think one of the differences too is really kind of this mindset about what is our primary objective. And sometimes our primary objective is very much behaviorally related. Our objective becomes we want the child to do this specific behavior. We want the child to say this specific word. We want the child to put these specific blocks on top of each other. And it becomes very much about a very like concrete, documentable skill, when really this is based on those skills in isolation are not going to be relevant if there's not social connection. And if you build the social connection first, the skills are going to come faster. So it's almost kind of like flipping what most of us are taught to think and the way we're taught to approach from this very clinical, and not that this is willy-nilly or not clinical in any way, but it's very, very intentional. It's a very intentional way of working with kids, but it's based on the belief that children will want to learn through interaction.
Yeah. Building that connection and building that safety and trust is really what we need to be focused on first.
Exactly.
So with the term floor time, is that in the name because ideally we should be on the floor with our clients on their level?
Yeah, so technically it's DIR, which stands for developmental, individual, and relationship based, right? So those are the three kind of cornerstones or pillars of the program. So developmental is that we are looking at a child's development in very incremental steps. It's very individualized. There's a lot of emphasis on sensory regulation, being able to read what a child needs, being able to read when a child is disengaging or turning away, and then relationship based. How do we use ourselves right? How do we intentionally use ourselves and our relationship with that child to help that child engage more in the world around them? So that's the formal, and then floor time became the more informal that kind of got thrown, because really it is play-based. When you're talking about children, interventions are best when they're in natural environments, they're with familiar people, they're relationship-based, and they're play-based. So floor time kind of came on as almost a nickname, and now it's incorporated as part of the program.
Well, I love that so much. You know, Jess and I were talking this morning about speech therapy and how oftentimes speech therapy is done at a table, sitting at a table. And Jess was like, well, why don't they sit on the floor? And it's like, I was like, they should have a beanbag chair. And like, it's a helpful reminder to say, get down on their level, sit on the floor. Just sitting on the floor. I know this is like so not even the whole concept of DIR, but I just like that that's the nickname now, because it's such a simple reminder of get down on their level.
Right. And that's just that statement that you made right there is such a cool segue into what a huge part of it is, and that's that whole developmental and individual part. And for some of our kids, sitting in a chair requires a lot more from their body, so they have less available in their brain. Yeah. Right? For some of our kids, flopping on the floor requires more than sitting in a chair. So it's really, again, are we really looking at that child holistically, and what do they need to be optimally available for learning, right? So a one size is not going to fit all. Right?
No, not at all. No.
Yeah. And so then if we look at DIR and early intervention, how do those kind of connect and intersect? I mean, I feel like the answer is obvious, but can you go into that?
Yeah, and I think it's perfect. This is a parent, is primarily a parent-based model, right? It's really very much based on that we are modeling interaction styles for caregivers. We're modeling tools. We know that whatever a kiddo does, any early intervention person knows, doesn't matter what we do an hour a week, right? It's what happens a million times during the rest of the week in the course of daily life. And so it really is based, it just is so married perfectly with those early intervention principles of empowering parents, natural environments, kids learn best through play. I mean, all of the science that we know about that matches up with this very kind of naturalistic, holistic, and developmental way of interacting with kids. And it's really based on if kids are there with us, right? If they are in the moment with us, we're golden, because nothing's going to happen if that doesn't come first. Yeah. So that's where the emphasis is, and that's where we feel like the magic is.
Yeah, and that's where we see the progress.
Yeah.
And so Rachel said this, you recently went through the training for this?
I did. I had done, so I come from a very developmental, relationship-based background anyway. I had done some training in floor time years ago, and I did extensive training in RDI, which is relationship development intervention. It's another form of relationship-based intervention for kids, specifically for kids somewhere on the spectrum. And then just recently went through some of the training again, because I had a little man in my life that I wanted to make sure I was on the top of my game for, and just wanted to I wanted to stay current, wanted to make sure that we need those reminders, right? We all get stuck in our ways, and we get busy, and we do things the way that's most efficient rather than always doing it the way that's most effective. Mm-hmm. And so just kind of needed that personal reboot a little bit. So It was a wonderful experience. It was a really good experience.
Is the training online or is it in person?
I was literally just going to say the same thing.
You guys are good. So if you go to icdl.com, icdl.com. You can pull up all of the information about the trainings. There is a 12-hour kind of introductory course, and it is available for CEUs. It's a great deep dive if you really want to understand the philosophy, some of the research behind it, and so on. If after that you want to continue, there are 3 different levels of certification that you can go through. And that is really I did the first level of certification, and that's a much smaller, that's very detail oriented. It's a small group. You do a lot of filming of yourself and an evaluation of those clips of you interacting so that you're getting that kind of feedback. So it's a much more kind of intimate and intensive and individualized training. Yeah. So you can kind of take that as far as you want to go. There's a couple different layers of that and levels of that.
So that's interesting. So part of that, you are working with the child and recording yourself working with the child, and then you send it for feedback?
Yeah. So then what we do is we do kind of a presentation on that child, and we go through kind of this assessment rubric, essentially. And we use the video clips that we do to kind of evaluate, are we assessing kind of where that child is correctly? Are we adapting our behaviors and our interactions to where that child is? And then getting feedback from the other people in the class and the instructors about, what we shouldn't do, those kinds of things. So really helpful. It's really helpful. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing this. I think I've been working with kids for about 160 years at this point. It's still it's still a little unnerving, right? To put yourself out there and have everybody watch you with a kid. But it's a really cool experience. And then you get to watch everybody else, right? So then you're watching all these other people and you're assessing and learning, and it was wonderful. It was a lot of work, but it was really a very cool experience.
Yeah, that sounds like how every training should be.
Honestly.
Yes, right? So I can't remember. If you go to the website, you can get the costs. But the 12-hour is a great place to start, and you have to have that anyway if you want to go into any of the certifications. And there was everybody in our class. I think we had a cohort of about 14 people, and we had psychologists, speech, OT, and educators in there. So it was everybody. It's not discipline specific at all.
What about parents? Should parents be looking into this as well?
Well, the 101 or the 101 course, which is that introductory course, I think is great for parents. There are a wealth of resources on that website specifically for parents. Okay. Now they do, if a parent does want to get certified, you cannot use your own child, right? Because they really are. Yeah. So it's because it's not just. Otherwise, that's kind of one-on-one coaching, right? And a parent could get more benefit from a different setup and a different relationship. Sure. But there are lots of opportunities, and they have ongoing classes all the time. 1-hour webinars, just all sorts of information.
Very cool.
Great resource.
Yeah, and I have a therapist that I work with who's done some of the training as well. I think maybe she did that intro 12-hour training, and she was talking to me about that. Can you give us maybe just a handful of ideas or recommendations for therapists who are listening from DIR, and what they could maybe, just a couple of ideas of things they could do with their clients now before they also jump into the training? Because of course all the therapists listening are going to jump into the training. Right.
And I hope so. It's a beautiful way of being with kids. It just really is just a natural, beautiful way of being with kids and respecting who they are. I think one of the things that I loved about it, and that I really carry with me, and I should know this, but I always need more reminders about how important sensory is, and that what is required of the body before the brain and the emotions are available. And so I think being aware of that, watching kids, looking for fatigue levels, looking for when they're slumping and slopping on the floor, and another really good reminder during the training for me was to trust the child a little more, especially when you're working with little ones. And typically I'm working with kids on the spectrum, and we're trying so hard to keep their attention with us. And if they turn around and they walk away or they break an engagement, we're quick to try to grab them back. And one of the things I learned was like to trust the child, and that if the relationship is really there, you're going to be interesting enough, they're going to come back to you, but they're breaking for a reason. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times that disconnect is I'm overstimulated, I need a sensory break, or, my brain needs to catch up with how much language is going on. So I think that's, giving some space when a child kind of breaks that interaction, and giving them some credit for that they're going to try to come back into that interaction. Using less language. Yes. And a lot more affect. Being aware that language requires so much brain power. Processing language for a child with a language delay can be very overwhelming. And so using more of our body, our affect, our emotion, our, gestures, those kinds of things, making sounds, silly sounds, instead of using a lot of words. That's a good reminder as well. And it also builds space for kids to give more back, right? If we're always filling the air with our words, there's not a lot of space for the kids to give something back. Yeah. So those would be couple of things that I would hold on to first and foremost.
I think those are great.
That makes me think, before you said, pausing and giving them a chance to talk, I was thinking about an episode that we did on the power of pause, which is exactly that. Giving them a chance to connect, to verbalize something, to make a sound, and then just observing, like you said, giving them a chance to take a break and come back. And instead of, Johnny, come back, Johnny, look at this. Watch them and see what they do. Are they going to the other room? Are they going to go stim for a minute and kind of regroup, and then they'll come back? And just observing what their body language is doing. I just feel like that's so powerful, especially in that early intervention area.
Yeah, and that's a huge foundation of the floor time as well, is following the child's lead. So if you're blowing bubbles and and you've had a great little 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever, and Johnny turns around and walks away, rather than getting him back for 3 more minutes of bubbles, what's he walking to? Because he's walking to where his attention is. Yeah. Whether that's to go flop into the sensory pillow bin, or whether that's to go play trucks. And so the premise of following the child's lead, and so we shift to where Johnny's going rather than calling Johnny back to us. Yeah. And it requires more of us as therapists and interventionists. It requires more of us. It's hard. It's one of our instructors used to call it sweat equity, and it really is, right? Because you're like, okay, I have to get the same things done through trucks now rather than through bubbles. So now I have to be, kind of on high alert of how I need to be shifting and changing with the child.
Yes, absolutely. Is there an age range for using DIR strategies and tools?
It really goes all the way from they follow a model or a hierarchy of what they call 6 FEDCs, which are functional, emotional, developmental competencies. And they go from being engaged in the world all the way to complex interactions, complex logic, reasoning, problem solving. And so, again, very developmental, very incremental, a lot of overlap. And so you could carry this well through working with adults. Absolutely well into working with adults. And then you're getting into more strategies about how you use your conversation and how you use your language rather than the actual actions or playing. But
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, let's sidestep just a little bit and kind of move into the topic of facilitating communication in the early intervention population. And you have a webinar coming up on this topic.
I love
on sensational brain, and that's kind of what motivated me to just ask you these questions and learn a little bit more and have you share some tips for our listeners. So if you could share a few things on promoting communication for early intervention clients, what would those be?
so it's going to be a lot of overlap with what we've just talked about, right? Because the language isn't going to come until you're regulated from a sensory standpoint and you have a reason to communicate. And you aren't going to communicate unless you have a reason to communicate, and our reasons to communicate are to share with others. That's why babies learn to talk, because they're trying to connect with a caregiver or a parent. They're trying to say what they want. They're trying to ask for something. They're curious. They need help. And so again, it comes from those strong social bonds as well. And so I think one of my first kind of reminders for all of us, and I think we know these things, we just need to bring it up to the top of our brain every now and then, is to make sure that we're not working on communication in isolation, right? I mean, it's fine. It's absolutely fine to do picture books and little baby Einstein flashcards and the things we want. But the magic's going to happen when we're in the car and we point to a cow and we say moo, right? How functional it's going to be. So, following the child's lead, making lots and lots of sounds, giving kids a lot of space. So we certainly want to be an active language model for them, but we also want to hush up enough to give them an opportunity to say something. The assigning meaning to their gestures and whatever utterances they're making. It may sound like gibberish coming out of a 2-year-old's mouth, but they are very clearly trying to have a conversation, and so we're going to continue that conversation back and forth. And it's amazing how often we just kind of disengage from that because we're just in a rush, right? We're thinking about other things, and we're not valuing that as much as if they were using what we would consider real words.
Okay, I have a pet peeve that I just need to get off my chest.
I can do this. This. Is it with me personally? Because if
Of
so, I'm
course not.
gonna have some technical difficulties if it's about
No.
That was our pet peeve.
No, okay. So let's say we have a toddler who's learning to communicate, right? And they don't have perfect articulation. They say things the wrong way. They use the wrong pronouns. It's not accurate, right? My pet peeve is when we're talking to these children and we're repeating back what they're saying incorrectly. When they say, I can't even think of a good example. I want a ball or something, and they say it incorrectly, and we repeat it incorrectly versus you're repeating it and saying, oh, you want a ball, or I want a ball. Like, that's always my thought is why would we repeat it back to them incorrectly when we want them to hear, oh, yes, you want a ball. I want a ball, not a doll, or something like that, right?
And that's exactly what we should do.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Oh, good. We can stay connected. I'm not.
Okay, great. We won't kick you off.
But no, I mean, what we should do is not correct. We should just model.
Yeah.
Now, I will do the mom thing, and I will say I have one personal exception to that.
Oh,
I think any of us who are moms or dads or parents or whatever, there's always those couple of words that our kids say when they're little
so cute.
that we don't want to correct them. because it's too cute. So every now let him, like we still in my house, my kids are in their mid-30s, and my youngest always said gank instead of drink. We still say ganks. Like we're still at family dinner, and anybody's like, "Can I get anybody a gank?" Keep some of those ones around for fun and for memory's sake. But absolutely, for the most part, we just simply model. That's it.
So they hear, that's what I meant to say. That's how you say it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I'll never forget my example I have to share really quick. My son was not even 2 yet, and he was talking. I have it on videotape, and he's like, he was saying, well, let me say what he said, and then you can see if you can guess what he said. I want more anus, is what we thought he was saying. And the context, you had to be there. He wanted more oranges. He wanted more oranges. And just the whole video is like, I want more. What is he saying? I want more oranges. And we gave him his oranges. And we still, to this day, joke about that,
Right,
so it's those exact examples.
I mean, we don't want to rush perfection to the point where we lose the precious moments of them being children.
Exactly. So there's a happy medium. There's a great balance that we can find. But when they are, consistently struggling with a word or with a phrase, just modeling how it should sound and what it should sound like. And we'll pick up on it
really,
so much faster.
It's none of us like to be corrected.
No.
Right? I mean, none of us like, even as, adults who are supposed to know what we're all about in this world, we don't really like somebody coming in saying, do it this way.
Yeah.
But if you can just watch, or if you can just be guided, that's all it is.
Yeah. It is, yeah.
Be gentle and having fun.
Okay, that's my pet peeve. We can continue on.
That's a very very reasonable pet peeve. That's a very reasonable pet peeve, and it would fit in perfectly.
So funny.
Okay, your turn.
No, I was just going to comment. I loved what you said about communication and why we communicate, because I think we don't. I know I don't think about that very often. Of why do we communicate with the people around us? What is the purpose of it? And I think that is really important to remember, the reasons behind communication, because then we can help these kids that we're working with communicate in a way that's meaningful for them.
Mm-hmm. And it's to share your thoughts and ideas. Yeah. I mean, that's really what it is. It's to share an experience with someone. Yeah. That's why we communicate, which is why that social emotional part, right, is so foundational. Because if we have that connection, there's going to be a stronger desire to take it further and deeper.
Yep. Well, and also in OT, we also look at, a child being able to communicate their wants and needs. Are they injured? Do they need a drink of water? Are they hungry? What do they want to eat? And also being able to communicate that is really important.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit more about supporting communication in those who are pre-verbal or who use AAC devices to communicate rather than verbal expression.
So this is just a really interesting area because, I'm a strong believer, and the research is there to back it, that we want to build all types of communication. We want to give kids as many options as possible for communication. And then we can worry about refining it down the road, and there's a lot of concern that if kids use baby signs, there will be no need to learn words, or if they use an AAC device, there'll be no reason for them to learn spoken words. And the research tells us the exact opposite. What it does is it keeps kids moving in that language center of the brain, and then sometimes the words will come. For some kids, the words aren't going to come, but it absolutely does not delay language, but it also it has been shown to promote. We also know that for the vast majority of kids, and certainly for typical language development, our receptive language, what we understand, is typically much higher than our expressive, which we can say. So we understand a lot more than what we can express. So giving kids an opportunity to kind of bridge that gap helps a lot, again, in that social emotional growth area, because you don't have the frustration. You're not likely to have as many meltdowns. That's really why, that's a lot of what the Terrible Twos is about, right? Is because these kids are going through this huge explosion of what they're able to understand, but they haven't caught up with what they can express, and their ideas are so much more complex than their language. And so what happens, the only way you can deal with that frustration is to act out, right? So, which is why with a 4-year-old, you can typically negotiate a little bit better, right? Because the language is catching up. So I really am a strong believer in all of that. Not a huge believer in devices as entertainment, but I am a huge believer in devices with intention, right? So whether that's you're going to use a video book together, or you're going to watch Miss Rachel together and sing along, or you're going to have simple pictures on a screen for a child to choose, that's with intention and that's with purpose. And that's going to promote language development.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing too with that is you said all of those examples doing them together rather than the set it and forget it approach, which I understand that is needed at sometimes, with kiddos and families.
Always.
But interacting together and singing the songs together, I just think that's what kids want too. Like, they want to share that connection with you, and they want you to be interested in what they're interested in too.
And so it kind of goes back. We're looping back a little bit to, we talked about why do children learn to speak? Why do they communicate? And it's because they want to connect. So yes, there is some value for watching a children's video when you're 8 months old. Maybe you'll have some language exposure, but it's input. There's not that desire for output. And that's where the that's where the problem comes. I
love that explanation.
Right. So I may be learning some vocabulary words, or I might be, and there's some very well researched good stuff out there. But when you do it together, not only are you getting the language exposure, but then you have the reason to express. You have the reason to do it back.
Yes. Can I say something? Just kidding. It makes me think of the video you shared in one of your webinars of the dad and the little boy sitting on the couch, and the dad was just, talking about football. I'm assuming it was like football or basketball that they were watching, and the little boy was like, and he couldn't talk. You couldn't understand anything he was saying, but the dad was just going along with it. Yep. And it was the cutest video I think I've ever seen.
And they had I'll send it to you and you guys can put it in the link or whatever, because I hope most people have seen it. It was floating around for quite a while, but they had a full-blown conversation. Yeah. And the little boy was mimicking dad's hand actions and intonation. And I mean, if you want to look an example of what language development looks like, right? And it all came from, again, the little boy didn't say one identifiable word, but boy, they had a conversation for probably 4 minutes. It's just spectacular.
It is.
It's spectacular.
It's a great reminder of, like, they don't have to be communicating with words in order to have a conversation. Like, you could tell how meaningful that was for the little boy and how beneficial it was. And just a reminder for families to, talk to your child like the presumed competence, right? Just talk to them like they know what you're saying, and we don't have to talk like a baby to them. It's just so important.
Well, and I think just to kind of piggyback on something you said that was super important too, I think we need to remind ourselves that communication is way more than language.
Yeah.
Right? It's way more than the spoken word. Yeah. So when an infant looks at a mom and smiles, that is clear communication. When a caregiver and a toddler giggle, that is communication, right? So I think sometimes we focus on the language because the spoken word's the part that we assess, right? That's what we're looking for. That's what we're worried about. That's what we're striving for. But that's not going to come if all those other things aren't there first.
Yeah.
Right? Think about our kids on the spectrum, right? You have words, but are you using them in the context of social situations and in the context of connection?
Yeah.
And that's really what it's about. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, that nonverbal communication is so huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was going to actually ask you about your private practice, and kind of segue into that of what you do professionally and how you support clients and families. And can you talk a little bit about that?
So I do a little bit of everything at this stage in my career. I am fortunate to do a lot of work with Rachel in Sensational Brain and do some courses and some micro-credential programs there, which I really enjoy doing. I do a lot of consultation with school districts. I work a lot with smaller private schools and helping them set up support services for kids with special needs because they don't have the benefit of, what the public school is mandated to offer. And then work with families individually. So just kind of on a consultation basis. That's typically all done. That part, working with families, is typically done via Skype or Zoom or FaceTime, whatever the case. Skype, I know. I was like, where did that come from? That's like AOL or something like that. I know. I'm glad you said that because my own brain caught that for a moment. I'm like, ooh, that was a blast from the past. And so I think I sent information on my website and such. But really, I think at this point, I'm really most enjoying teaching and just. I think I shared with Rachel a year or so ago, I'm kind of at a stage where I just want to give it all away, right?
Yeah.
Spend all these years as a professional learning. Now it's just like,
share your wisdom.
Yeah, get it.
Yes.
And so I'm still taking classes so I can give that away too.
I love it. Well, Lori, it's always so wonderful to chat with you. You've left us with a lot of great little nuggets of information. If you could leave us with one last piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Have fun. If you are in the presence of a child and you are not enjoying them, what better magic is there in the world than that?
Yeah.
Right? Accept them for who they are in the moment and just enjoy the magic of childhood.
Yeah. Beautiful. It goes by so fast.
It goes by so fast.
Well, thank you so much, Lori. This was wonderful.
Oh, thank you guys. I appreciate you having me. Thank you. And let me know if you have any follow-up questions or if anybody has any additional information. Let me know, and I'm happy to help you or point you in the right directions or do whatever I can do to support your community.
Awesome. We will link all of your information in the show notes in the description.
Sounds good. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you so much for listening to All Things Sensory by Harkla.
If you want more information on anything mentioned in the show, head over to harkla.co/podcast to get the show notes.
If you have any follow-up questions, the best place to ask those is in the comments on the show notes or message us on our Instagram account, which is at Harkla_family or at All Things Sensory Podcast. If you just search Harkla, you'll find us there.
Like we mentioned before, our podcast listeners get 10% off their first order at Harkla. Whether it's for one of our digital courses or one of our sensory swings, the discount code SENSORY will get you 10% off. That's SENSORY.
Head to harkla.co/sensory to use that discount code right now.
We are so excited to work together to help create confident kids all over the world. While we make every effort to share correct information, we're still learning.
We will double check all of our facts, but realize that medicine is a constantly changing science and art.
One doctor or therapist may have a different way of doing things from another.
We are simply presenting our views and opinions on how to address common sensory challenges, health-related difficulties, and what we have found to be beneficial that will be as evidence-based as possible.
By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or your child.
Consult your child's pediatrician or therapist for any medical issues that he or she may be having.
This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast.
Thanks so much for listening.